By far the most popular request is pseudocode. In an exam, do not panic with pseudocode. Pseudocode, just pretend code. Pseudocode, just pretend code. I'm going to run through an example and tell you how it's quite straightforward. It doesn't seem it at the time, but it's quite straightforward. Write an algorithm using pseudocode to calculate the salary of a worker after a 10% pay increase. Now, if you look at this question again, write an algorithm using pseudocode to calculate. So you know there's going to be a calculation somewhere. The salary, so there's going to be an amount that you need to calculate with of a worker after a 10% pay increase. So in somewhere in your algorithm, you're going to have to allow for a 10% pay increase in salary. Salary is the amount of money you get at the end of a month for working. So you need to have a salary and you also need to have a new salary. So you just can't have the salary in the pseudocode. You have to have the salary and a new salary, and it has to go up by 10%. In an exam, if you get stuck, write it in plain English. Write it in plain English. So the simple solution to this problem is you take the worker's current salary and you multiply it by 1.1. 1.1 represents a 10% increase. 1.1 represents a 10% increase. Again, if you get stuck in an exam, just put increase by 10% and then you display the answer. So this solution is it's good enough because you've broken the problem down into obvious steps. You've looked at the question, you've said, what do I need to do? I've got my current salary and it has to go up by 10%. Take the worker's current salary, multiply the salary by 1.1, so it goes up 10%. Then you display the answer. A better way of doing it. You are allowed now, it appears in exams, to write in Python. So this is very close to Python. Very, very close to Python. But it's not Python. It's pretend code. This is pseudocode. So the first thing that it's done is, look, it's set the salary as an integer. Set the salary as an integer. So it says salary equals integer. So it's made the data type known. So you know the data type. So you go salary equals input, enter your salary. That gets the salary from the user. So salary equals input, enter your salary. As I said before, you can't just have salary. You need a new salary. This new salary says new salary equals salary times 1.1. Then you print out the new salary so the user sees the salary. So let's go back to this. It says at the top, it sets the salary as an integer. So it just sets the salary. Then it says salary equals input, enter your salary. So it gets the variable salary into the computer. Then it performs a calculation, a multiplication on the salary. New salary equals salary times 1.1, print new salary. That is pseudocode. This is pseudocode. This is pseudocode. Even though pseudocode is not a programming language, you still need to make sure it's readable and easy to interpret. Anybody should be able to read your pseudocode and know what it should do. I'm going to give an example now of another piece of pseudocode. When registering on a website, a user's password should be more than 6 characters long, and it must be different from their username. Write an algorithm to check if the password is valid. Valid means acceptable. If it's valid, it should say why. When registering on a website, a user's password should be more than 6 characters long, and it must be different from their username. Write an algorithm to check if the password is valid. If it's invalid, it should say why. So if it's not valid, it should say why. Let's break this question down. When registering on a website, a user's password, so you know in the pseudocode somewhere, you need the user's password, should be more than 6 characters long. You know that you probably need some sort of greater than or less than sign there. 6 characters long, should be more than 6 characters long, and it must be different from the username. So you know somewhere you've got to compare the password to the username. So look, the question tells you exactly what to do. Just read it carefully and slowly and highlight if you need to. Read it carefully. So when registering on a website, a user's password should be more than 6 characters long, and it must be different from their username. Write an algorithm to check if the password is valid. If it's not valid, it should say why. If the length of the password is less than or equal to the 6 characters long, or password is the same as the username, then it is invalid, or else the password is valid. If the length of the password is less than or equal to 6 characters, this is what it tells you there. The password should be more than 6 characters. So if it's less than or equal to 6 characters, or the password is the same as the username, then it is not valid. Then it is invalid, else the password is valid. It's not accepted, or it is accepted. This code is too vague and unstructured. It would give, it won't give you the reasons, it won't give you the marks, this. But if you get stuck, just do this. Do not leave an algorithm question blank. If you get stuck, do this. If you're not stuck, which you won't be after this video, you do this. It's a really, really good idea to look at the question again. Every few minutes when you're doing it, every few seconds when you're doing it, look at the question again to make sure you have grasped what it's asking for. So when registering on a website, a user's password should be more than 6 characters long, and it must be different to their what? Yeah, you got that there. Username. Write an algorithm to check if the password is valid. If it's not valid, it should show why. The pseudocode looks like this. At the top, you've got your variables. So variables are at the start of the program. So var, username, password as string. Username equals input, enter your username. You need to prompt, you need to get the username from the user. Then you need to get the password. So this is how you use your variables. So you've declared the variables at the top. You've initialized the variables at the top. You've said username, password as string. Then you get the input for the username there. Then you get the password, input for the password there. Now is the bit where you use selection. Remember if statements, a selection. If statements. So it says if the length of the password is less than or equal to 6, then print password is too short. How do you decide what to print? It says show a message. You could have said password is invalid. You could have said password is invalid. So if the length of the password is less than or equal to 6, then print password is too short. Else, if password becomes equal to username, then print password is the same as the username. If password equals username, then print password is the same as the username. Else, print password is valid. End if. If the password equals, this equals means if the person types in the same password as username. So if the entry into the keyboard equals, password equals username, then print password is the same as username. So if the password is the same as, let's call this the same as today, username, then print password is the same as the username. Else, print password is valid. End if. End if. When you start an if, end if, else, end if. Indent, indent your if statements, indent them until the end of the if statement. So indent them. Look at this really carefully. Just study this little section here. Study it. Study it. Look. If length of password is less than or equal to 6, then print password is too short. Else, if password equals username, if password is the same as the username, then print password is the same as the username. Else, print password is valid. End if. So this answers the question. This answers the question that was initially asked. Before I go back to the question to check if we've answered it, I'm going to talk about indentation very quickly. In pseudocode, indent, if you start an if statement, indent the next line, else outdent, that's actually called outdent. Indent again, if it's within the same if statement, you indent, and then at the end of it, you have the outdented. The best way to do this is to study this for a few minutes. Have a look at how it flows for a few minutes. I believe we've answered the question because it asked us this. The question asked, when registering on a website, the user's password, that's my first variable. Password, that's my first variable. You know what? Look, I'm going to highlight this password. It's my first variable. Watch. Password. Password is my variable. Password is a variable. And then it says username is another variable. Username. And when I'm talking about checking, if I need to know whether to use an if statement or not, I need to see if there's a selection. Do I have to choose? Do I have to make a choice? When you've got if and else, you're making a choice. I believe we've answered the question. I believe we've answered the question with this pseudocode. Take a few minutes to look at the pseudocode. If you get stuck in an exam, write in plain English. Do not leave the questions blank. Write in plain English if you get stuck. But this is a nice guide into how to just write simple pseudocode. There is not really a right or wrong answer because an examiner will look for your computational thinking throughout. So just write on the paper. Make sure you've written something that looks very similar to this using the words they give you in the question.